All right. Well, welcome back to another episode of Married to Real Estate.
Very happy to be married to real estate.
Well, I am too. So it makes it good for both of us.
Yes, it does.
So today we are going to talk about rates again. It's so very volatile. And as we tell people, buckle up. There's lots of information to process. And what we want to somewhat separate today is the difference of when you hear things on the news like the Fed is going to be increasing rates or really just increasing rates. What correlation does that have with mortgage interest rates? Because they are not one and the same. So I'm going to let you take it away.
Yes, ma'am. And as you said, we get a lot of calls from buyers or sellers who say, hey, should I do something now? Because I hear the rates are going to go up, right? Because they're hearing the Fed's going to raise the interest rates. So just want to go a little history with the last 6 months that can kind of explain it pretty well, I think, right?
Okay.
So mid-July or so, we really started getting the bad inflation numbers.
Right.
That's where
year over year.
9%, 9.5%, year over year numbers were just awful. And the markets knew that the Fed was going to get very aggressive with their raising of the rates.
Right.
All right. So the Fed knew that the markets knew that the Fed was going to increase rates three times at 0.75 each time, 3/4 of a point, right? So in that, the market started pricing in the mortgage rates, and they started going up
a lot
at that point in July before these increases actually happened. So middle of July, we're sitting around 5.25, 5.5. By middle end of September, we were sitting at 7.25.
Right.
And those rate hikes had not happened yet, right? But they knew they were going to happen.
They were coming.
All
right.
So they priced in the rate hikes before they actually happen because the market's always looking forward.
And I also remember that the interest rate hikes happen a lot quicker and faster than dropping.
That's correct.
So.
Right, that's a whole nother subject. It's for another podcast of what's going to happen in the future, right?
Right.
So we got to 7.25, and then in November, we actually got the first lower inflation reading.
Good news.
Some good news.
Slightly good.
So it was, it was good in the fact that the markets felt that we had hit peak inflation, and they felt at that point that the Fed's hikes were going to start decreasing, not increasing.
Right. They were still going to hike, but just not in the 3/4 basis.
Correct.
Right.
So it was November 12th or 13th that CPI number came out, showed inflation was starting to come down. We possibly had hit peak inflation. But everybody knew that the Fed was going to raise 50 basis points in December again.
Right.
They knew they were going to raise. But mortgage rates came down at that point from 7.25, and by the time we got to that rate hike in December, they were sitting at 6%. So they'd actually come down 1.25%.
Right.
And the Fed still hiked the 50 basis points, right? Because the markets knew what the Fed was going to do.
Exactly. Okay.
So it's really it's when you hear the news, hey, the Fed is going to do this, everybody already knew it. Right. And everything's already been factored into those rates at that time.
Right. And it makes sense that when they say, hey, the Fed is going to increase rates by whatever, quarter, half, 3/4, that's already been factored in. And it doesn't necessarily mean that mortgage interest rates are going to increase at all.
Correct.
They may decrease.
As they did in this case.
Exactly.
From November to December. Now, it does mean that, like, on your home equity loan, those rates are going to go up, or your credit cards, car loans, those kind of things.
Right.
But when it comes to a mortgage rate, they're tied more to the 10-year bond and the yield on the 10-year bond.
Okay. So with all of that information, what do you see kind of coming down the pike in your crystal ball for 2023?
So I listen to and follow a lot of people that help me with my crystal ball, right?
Of course.
So what the market knows now is the next time the Fed meet is in February. So there's a meeting in February and March. And what is baked in at this point is another 25 basis point hike in each one, February and March. So that's already baked into the rates we're seeing today because they already know that. So the rates had come down to about 6%, maybe a touch under 6% at one point. They've ticked back up to about 6.25 over the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, seeing a little up and down.
Just some natural things, actual global things that had kind of happened that made the yields go that way. But according to the prognosticators out there that we follow, Anywhere you'll get a range of a low from like 5 to 5.5, higher range 6.5 to 7, something like that.
Right.
My personal opinion, and I base this off of Barry Habib, who my favorite procrastinator, who's been the number one out there for a long time. He's in that 5.5 to 6 range, and I think that's where we're going to kind of hang out as we get into the first quarter of the year, second quarter, and everybody's kind of thinking as we get to the second half of 2023 that you're going to see the rates tick down closer to 5 and hang out in that range for a while.
Well, I think we'll really start to see people come out, or the buyers have a little more confidence coming out at that point.
Absolutely. I agree.
But all right. Well, thank you so much for giving a little clarity on what happens with rates. And of course, we love to counsel our buyers and sellers on what's going on with the market. And markets can change in a day. So we're here for any advice, whether you are looking to sell or buy now, in 2 months, 2 years, 10 years. So please give us a call and visit us at sablehouseteam.com.
I'm a little geeky with those conversations. I actually
You?
believe it or not, I love
My
those
little bean
yes,
counter.
yes.
Well, thank you for joining us.
Yeah. Have a great day.